I trace it back to 10 years ago when you said Donald Trump was an authoritarian. And you know what, Scott, I've got to hand it to you. That was a remarkable forecast because 10 years later, I think you called it. Here's Donald Trump today, the man with the heart and soul of a fascist, showing us he now has the bona fides.
That's garbage.
By tonight, ordering investigations into American citizens. That's why members of his party, that's why members of his
He's running the executive against him.
In today's video, Miles Taylor destroys Scott Jennings on NewsNight with Abby Phillip as the two explode into one of the most heated clashes we've seen on CNN in months. Miles Taylor comes in with receipts calling out Scott Jennings' blatant hypocrisy, from his defenses of Donald Trump to his sudden outrage over issues he ignored for years. And while Scott Jennings tries to spin, dodge, and dance around the facts, Miles Taylor keeps dragging the conversation back to the real dangers of Trump's authoritarian tendencies, the GOP's internal civil war, and why voters are fed up with MAGA theatrics when affordability and healthcare are actually on the line. This showdown gets spicy fast, and Miles Taylor's sharp, no-nonsense takedowns leave Scott Jennings stumbling. So let's dive in and watch how Miles Taylor shuts down Scott Jennings on NewsNight with Abby Phillip.
Political romances are often short-lived, and she has been critical of him not only about the Epstein files, but about his involvement in foreign affairs, and I don't mean with women, I mean in various parts of the world. And
you said it, no.
just to clear the table on that one. and so it's not surprising that they have had a breakup of sorts after all. He didn't give her a ring, he just supported her for a little while.
Listen, this fire is spreading. I mean, right, it started off talking about Epstein in the beginning. Then during the shutdown, she was one of the few Republicans that correctly identified Donald Trump's unwillingness to deal with the ACA subsidies and lower healthcare costs for Americans as being one of the reasons why the shutdown occurred.
Yeah, she was very outspoken about that.
Now she's talking about foreign policy. This is not going away. Whatever is going on between them seems to only be heating up, and I think the rest of us should get the popcorn.
I think they're here for it.
And a war with words, sorry, Scott, a war with words with Donald Trump is such a risky business that I cannot believe she has the bravery to engage in it, because even if she was right, she's still going to lose.
Is there an example of anyone beating Donald Trump at this game?
Never. This is his game, and he's great at it, and she's barking up a tree that she's going to fall on her really hard.
You know, it's interesting. He has some people who profess to be strong supporters who do oppose him more often than the people that you might not think are his strongest supporters. She's one of them. Thomas Massie in Kentucky is another one. Rand Paul, my home state senator, he takes on Trump, although they profess to be Trump supporters. In this case, I think he had the order out of order. I trace all this back to his decision, the righteous decision to strike Iran. She was against it. So were some of the people who occupy that wing of the party. He defied them. And since that time, they all seem to be stridently picking at him on this issue or that. And then, of course, everybody knows in Washington, Miles, you know, the fastest way to get in front of a television camera if you're a Republican is to come out and crap on Donald Trump. And so that is what she is doing.
But you know, Scott,
that is what she is doing because
she is mad at him
over these issues, and that's what happened.
Scott, I trace it further back than that. I trace it back to 10 years ago when you said Donald Trump was an authoritarian. And you know what, Scott, I've got to hand it to you. That was a remarkable forecast because 10 years later, I think you called it. Here's Donald Trump today, the man with the heart and soul of a fascist, showing us he now has the bona fides. By tonight, ordering investigations into American citizens. That's why members of his party, that's why members of his
running the executive against him. Why are you so upset he's running the executive branch?
For the same reasons you predicted he shouldn't. For the same reasons, Scott, you said he violated his oth and he should never be back in that office.
I happily voted
That's why I'm upset for the man being in the Oval Office.
I happily voted for him 3 times.
I know that.
The alternative was terrible.
And a lot of your friends were shocked.
Yeah, well, a lot of my friends would have been shocked at you trying to subvert the elected president of the United States, which you did.
Oh, well, I proudly did. I proudly
some
said
mid-level
to the
staffer
country
substituting his judgment for the elected president of the United States.
Well, Scott, I would have loved to have seen you stand up to it.
Good luck.
It's honestly wild how confident Scott Jennings sounds while ignoring the mountain of evidence that backs up what Miles Taylor has been warning about for years. And what makes Miles' position even stronger here is that he isn't speaking in hypotheticals. We've already watched Trump test the boundaries of presidential power in ways no modern president has attempted. Independent watchdogs from the Government Accountability Office to inspectors general across multiple agencies repeatedly flagged abuses of executive authority during Trump's term. That's not partisan spin. Those are institutional, non-political bodies saying something was seriously off. And when Miles brings up the authoritarian streak, he's not exaggerating. Political scientists across the country, including researchers at VDem and Brightline Watch, have documented measurable democratic backsliding under Trump, declines in rule of law norms, political neutrality of institutions, and basic constraints on executive power. These are global democracy watchdogs, and they flagged the US during the Trump years in ways they never had before. That's exactly the context Miles is drawing from, even if Jennings pretends it's all theater. Another point that strengthens Miles' argument is how often Trump has publicly demanded investigations into private citizens and political opponents. That's not just tough talk, it mirrors the exact patterns found in countries experiencing democratic erosion. Leaders in Hungary, Turkey, and Brazil under Bolsonaro used the same tactic, blur the line between state power and personal vendettas. And Jennings trying to frame criticism of Trump as some kind of career strategy is just dishonest. If speaking out against Trump were good for Republicans' careers, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Jeff Flake, Mark Sanford, they'd all still be in office. Instead, they were politically exiled for refusing to fall in line. So honestly, Miles Taylor isn't just winning this exchange, he's grounding his arguments in documented history, political science, and real institutional evidence. Jennings' deflection can't compete with that.
Back to MTG. Is it the sign of a changing tide? Is it the sign, or is it a singular one back and forth between one Republican who is getting into a fight with Donald Trump? Or do you think there is a possibility that it is the beginnings of Republicans seeing past the Donald Trump era?
The short answer is that we don't know.
Because you've got like Thomas Massey saying exactly that. Like, your vote on this discharge petition is going to outlast Donald Trump's time here. So you need to consider that when you make your decision.
But if we keep paying attention, what we see is that last week, the president got his clock clean in an election. All the Republicans got their clock clean in an election. This week, we see what's happening with the Epstein files. So next week, we're going to see them take a vote. And if we see a bunch of Republicans defect on the Epstein files, I think what we're seeing is the real testing of the waters to find out whether or not you can oppose Donald Trump and still get elected. When we talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene, the one thing we haven't talked about yet is her fundraising prowess. And according to sources, she is the most popular fundraiser in the Republican Party other than Donald Trump.
She's
If
at
that's the
12%
case,
of the
they're
vote.
going to divide up.
This prediction about no one's going to care about this.
I was asking it a question. I wasn't predicting it.
No, you said people were somebody said that this was going to outlive.
Tom Massey.
And the prediction that this was going to outlive. I totally disagree with that. I think right now more people are worried about whether they can watch ESPN on YouTube TV tomorrow than they care about this. And that's certainly going to be true in 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years from today.
But what they do care about, hold on, but what they do care about, they do
get their clocks cleaned last
They do
week.
care about
They
the
did
fact that the
not.
president's sort of breaking everything.
Right.
They see a hole in the White House right now. I was in Detroit last weekend for an event, and it was the #1 thing people came up to me at the scholarship dinner to ask about. Is it okay for the president to tear down the White House without anybody's permission?
That was the #1 thing?
That was the #1 thing that people brought up unprovoked.
The idea of, I keep hearing this over and over again, is like, no one cares about this because they only care about that.
You know what they care about? They can't buy a house.
That they can't. They care about
houses
affordability.
aren't affordable, and that food costs too much. But they don't care about the White House. The fact is, a president who can't model the White House.
Many people care about the White House.
That's ridiculous.
Every visitor.
Many Americans care about the White House.
You
don't care about the White House.
Can't remodel a room in the White House.
He didn't remodel it. He tore it down.
Tomato.
In the middle of a
I couldn't
government
tear down
shutdown.
my garage without getting a permit from the city.
And that's
He can
all
tear it down.
But let me ask you this.
And he's tearing down a ballroom.
I think this often when people say, you're all talking about this, but here's the focus should really be this. People hold multiple thoughts and focuses in their heads at the same time. Like, people can care about multiple things. They can care about not being able to buy a new home. They can care about the skyrocketing cost of food, which we'll talk about shortly.
What Jamal Simmons is pushing back on here is honestly something we see all the time. Whenever conservatives like Scott Jennings and Betsy McCaughey get uncomfortable with a topic that exposes dysfunction inside the GOP, they immediately pivot to nobody cares. But the reality simply doesn't match that narrative. If anything, the data shows the opposite. Voters absolutely care about institutions, corruption, and whether elected officials are acting in good faith. Gallup has been tracking institutional trust for decades, and trust in the presidency and Congress is at some of the lowest levels ever recorded. Because people do notice when leaders bend rules, dodge transparency, or use power for personal gain. And this whole Republicans didn't get their clocks cleaned spin ignores the very real trend lines. In special elections throughout 2023-2024, Democrats have been overperforming their baseline numbers by double digits in many districts. Analysts from 538 and the Cook Political Report have pointed out that these results are often early warning signs of broader voter frustration, especially among suburban and independent voters who are tired of chaos politics from the GOP. Plus, the idea that Americans only care about affordability and nothing else sells voters short. Look at recent polling. Issues like government ethics, threats to democracy, and political extremism consistently rank near the top of voter concerns. People can care about the cost of groceries and the integrity of the presidency. Pretending they can't is just a rhetorical escape hatch used to avoid uncomfortable conversations. Jamal is right. You can't fix affordability or anything else in a system that people no longer trust. Accountability and economic issues aren't competing priorities. They're connected, and the sooner Republicans stop pretending otherwise, the sooner we can get real solutions on the table.
And they can care about, I don't know, anything else. Stacey Plackett getting text messages from Jeffrey Epstein, if you want to take it from Scott's side. Like, you can hold all of these thoughts. I always think it's just someone trying to say to me, I don't want to answer your question by just trying to deflect that way. I find it a deflection when people say, don't focus on this. You need to focus. Everyone only cares about this one issue.
Well, I mean, if you're analyzing it from the perspective of like political consultant speak, like what do voters care about? How do we get voters to move a certain direction? Next year, the way you'll get voters to move would be on cost of living, healthcare. I mean, things that actually motivate their lives. They may have some interest in this, some passing interest in it, but motivation to vote? I mean, everybody knows what the bread and butter issues are. This won't be one of them, but the ones that will be relevant are quite obvious.
I disagree with Scott fervently on Donald Trump, and I could not agree with him more on that point. Voters aren't going to care about this next year. For better or for worse, they are going to care about things like affordability. Everyone in politics is going to be running that direction in the lead up to the election.
The people that do care about it, though, and consistently get lost in it, are the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, who then just wrote a letter to members of Congress saying, think about if this was you, and think about if this was your child when you're taking this vote next week.
Do you think
I am saying that because...
Do you think the victims would agree with Donald Trump asking the Department of Justice to look into people that may have been involved in this and got away with
Scott,
it?
I will
it would have been
100%
nice if he did
not
it
speak
when he
for
got
victims.
into
I know they can
office.
speak for themselves. I do know that Democrat, even Ro Khanna, said, everyone, investigate it.
Well, there seems to be a lot of anger about Donald Trump saying, well, maybe these people need to be looked into. Why?
Right. I think where the interest is if these people are looked into, a member of Congress actually said it today, we don't have time to run it, but if these people are looked into, does that mean that Donald Trump can be looked into as well?
Is there a shred of evidence he ever did anything untoward?
Is there a shred of evidence?
No.
that
About
he-
anybody else, is there a shred of evidence? No. All right, same answer for the other people.
What Miles Taylor is pushing back against here makes total sense, because Scott Jennings is doing what a lot of Republican strategists do when the Epstein files come up: pretend it's either a distraction or something voters can't hold in their heads alongside other issues. But that argument falls apart the moment you look at how Americans actually respond to political scandals involving abuse of power. When people feel like the system protects elites at the expense of everyone else, trust collapses in and that absolutely affects voting behavior. Pew Research, for example, has shown that trust in federal institutions is at near historic lows, and scandals involving high-level cover-ups are one of the main drivers behind that. And Scott's "no evidence Trump ever did anything" line, come on. Even if you set aside Trump's associations with Epstein, there's extensive, documented reporting on Trump's pattern of using government power for personal purposes. Everything from pressuring DOJ officials to overturn the election, to trying to weaponize federal agencies against critics. This isn't speculation. These findings came directly from sworn testimony in the January 6th committee and DOJ investigations. So of course people are concerned when Trump suddenly acts like a crusader for accountability. It's selective, inconsistent, and historically self-serving. Plus, the idea that voters only care about affordability and don't care about issues of justice or abuse of power is just wrong. Look at the Larry Nassar case. Look at clergy abuse scandals. Look at the #MeToo movement. People absolutely care when victims are ignored and powerful individuals go untouched. The Epstein survivors aren't an afterthought. They're the reason this matters. Miles is right to call out the double standard. You can care about affordability and hold abusers accountable. Pretending those things can't coexist is just a convenient dodge for people who don't want accountability in the first place. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.